The 2022 sessions of China are right around the corner. To explore some of the scientific and technological issues that will be discussed at the meetings, we're launching a special series called Decoding the Future. On today's show, we will focus on hybrid rice. But what exactly is hybrid rice and why it is important, and do the crops mean for the future of food security? We'll start first with a short video about this. Rice is life. Originating over 15,000 years ago, rice is at the heart of human civilization. It supports industry, inspires culture, and feeds more than half of the world's population. But the world is still struggling with hunger, malnutrition, and even famine. The demand for food is far from being met. As the world's population is about to reach 9.8 billion by 2050, we need to produce 60% more food with less land. That is not easy. We need more rice and better rice. To start, let's zoom in to what rice is made of. Normally, rice's flour contains both female and male organs. That allows it to pollinate itself without the help of bees. But this also means it does not enjoy the genetic diversity of cross-pollination. Now imagine there are two types of rice. Rice A is known for high yields. Rice B is resilient against stress of weather. Our goal is to create a super rice seed that combines the good traits of both A and B. That means we need crossbreeding. But how? We need to stop rice's pollinating itself. Imagine we could find a natural strain of rice A whose male organs are weak. So weak that it has to accept pollens from rice B for reproduction. And that is what happened. Now we have a hybrid with traits of high yield quality from A and resistance to stress of weather from B. We have a hybrid rice. So the key is to find that rice with a sterile manhood. And then they found it. In 1970, Chinese scientist Yuan Longping and his team found the magic plant, a male sterile rice, in the pond right behind me. 3 years later, Yuan produced the world's first commercial hybrid rice, Nanyo No. 2.
水稻有杂种优势。我第一次在上个世纪60年代的时候，在田里发现一个天然的杂交稻。当时水稻的产量呢，一般就是400斤左右，404斤呢。我那个杂种呢，我讲有1000斤，是吧？它是4、5秒就产量翻了一倍。那个天然杂种它是穗子大，籽粒饱满，是吧？所以说我兴趣若狂，就决心研究杂交水稻。
With yields 20% above conventional varieties, his creation can feed 70 million more people each year. Today, hybrid rice is planted in more than half of total rice growing area in China. It allows the country to feed a quarter of the world's population with 7% of the arable land.
我们现在以超级杂交稻亩产原来从700公斤、800公斤、1000公斤，现在到了1200公斤，是吧？我们现在要向1200公斤是18吨每公斤。我们从今年开始，我们向每公斤20吨冲刺。
And Yuan was later given the title of the father of hybrid rice. And the impact of his technologies goes beyond the national border. Now, Hybrid rice is grown in Asia, America, and Africa, even in sand and seashores.
如果全世界有一半稻田，就是1亿6千万，有8000万公顷，种上了我们的杂交稻，每公顷增产2吨，那是每年可以增产稻谷1亿6千万吨，可以多养活5亿人口。
But there is still room for the technology to make further progress. The good traits of hybrid rice do not pass on to its offspring. Farmers need to buy seeds every year and learn the technology from experts. That is a big burden for farmers, especially those in poor regions. But luckily, scientists are making progress again. They have bred the 3G hybrid rice, and that means the application of the technology is going to be way cheaper and easier. Farming started with human ingenuity. Farmers plowed up the land, drove off pests, dug up weeds. By its own nature, farming manipulates the environment. Farming is not natural. On the other hand, hybrid rice is the plow of our time. Humans are applying their knowledge of nature to produce more with as few resources as possible. In this case, hybrid rice has served China well, and it could also feed and sustain a better world. And join me today for discussions are Dr. Maximo Torero, Chief Economist and Assistant Director General of Economic and Social Development Department at the FAO in Rome, Professor Zhang Jianping, Director General of the Center for Regional Economic Cooperation at CIITE, and Dr. Catherine Konyanga of the Food Security Center at the University of Nairobi. Let me start with you, Mr. Zhang. Of course, China has been making efforts to feed its people, and that's a huge population, roughly 1.4 billion people. And technology helps, better irrigation helps. What do you make of the crops of hybrid rice has been making this contribution to China's food security?
Okay. Let me start by my personal experiences. When I was a child, every month I had 15 kilograms, food coupon, including core powders, 70%, and another 30%, including 20%, wheat powders, and only 10% rice. When I was a student in Peking University, at that time, every month for me, 18 kilograms, food coupon, including 60% wheat powder, food, and 40% rice. At that time, actually, that those roommates from south part of China, they like to enjoy rice, so they prefer to change their, wheat powder coupon to me, and we can, exchange our, hobbies. So today you can find that every Chinese, they can enjoy rice when they like to enjoy. So I mean that thanks to hybrid rice, because the yield, doubled almost. That in China today, actually our rice supply, our self-sufficient ratio is about 98%. So a lot of people not only enjoy rice, but also enjoy those processing rice products in China. Meanwhile, a part of China's rice products also can export to other countries. Of course, we also import a small part of rice products from other countries. So
it's all about productivity in a way. But do you think the hybrid rice technology has, in what way it has raised the productivity of Chinese agriculture? Because obviously the background is that China actually doesn't have enough arable land.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, in the past half of centuries, especially in the near 40 years, a lot of Chinese scientists and engineers, they are working so hard to promote hybrid rice technology advancement. Especially Professor Yuan Longping, as a team leader, very famous in this field. His team promoted, hybrid, genetic engineer technology advanced in China. Also, their technology can, popularize in other developing countries to increase, rice production. In this regard, United Nations and international societies, they are very grateful to Professor Yuan and his team members. Also, all over the world, especially those poor people, poor country, they suffering from, food securities. Of course, they can see hopes in the future by this genetic technology.
And Mr. Marrero, you work for the Food and Agriculture Organization. What is your assessment of technology in agricultural development?
Thank you very much. So technology in agricultural development is crucial because it's the only way we can increase productivity of crops, but also it's the only way that we can have varieties which are more resistant to weather shocks and to pests, so that farmers can be able to get the returns from what they invest. So in the world that we live today, where there is a need to feed millions of people, 120 million people are today undernourished, technology can play a crucial role to minimize the undernourishment of those people.
And Professor Zhang, food security and agriculture are major priorities and hot topic issues at the annual 2 sessions almost every year. And faced with downward economic pressure and the global pandemic, what do you think will be on this year's agenda regarding agriculture and food security in China?
Yeah, you're right. Actually, in China, we often say that agriculture sector is the most important sector for China's economy and for China's economic security. That's why every year, by the beginning of every year, the Central Committee and the central government will discuss and release related documents on agriculture sectors. For China, because we have the biggest population in the world, that means we have to guarantee our food security. In this regard, in the past decades, you can find that China is making efforts to keep our green self-sufficient ratio at about in the past 95%. Right now, actually, we are lowering a little bit. Also, we need to keep 90% of those greens from our domestic production. I think this is a responsible attitude. Also, that in China, of course, some people will thought about those, GMO crops. But for a hybrid, rice, just because they are mainly focusing on, rice species itself, there is no trans species genes from other species. So I don't think that Chinese people, they worry about, hybrid rices.
And Dr. Kongyanga, what is the food security issue like in your country, and what is the technology's role in farming?
The food security situation is not so good because of this COVID-19 pandemic and a lot of issues with climate change. And so we've been having challenges with food access and food availability. Right now, most of our food is actually coming from other countries, so that means we are not able to produce enough to be consumed by all Kenyans, so we have to also rely on food from other countries. And I think for me, mostly is the lack of adequate technologies and mechanization in agriculture that can really increase productivity and the production of food crops that can be sufficient enough for everyone, and therefore be able to meet the nutritional requirement of the population.
Okay, we have collected some ideas and suggestions from social media users on the issue of agriculture and food security. So African said, Kenya has always prided itself as an agricultural hub. Why is it that there are no stable foods in government-owned silos? Let's talk to Dr. Kunyanga about this.
I think mostly it's been due to lack of investment, enough investment in agriculture. And as you know, agriculture is the main backbone in terms of the economy of most African countries. So you find that if you do not invest enough in agriculture, then there is not enough that is produced, and this means then people are food insecure. So we really, sometimes it's not that the technologies are not there, they are there, but you have to invest in those technologies so that you can produce enough food for people to actually eat. So, and as you know, most of the farmers are smallholder farmers, meaning most farmers are owning less than 2 acres of land. This is not really enough to do large-scale farming that can produce enough food for everyone. So I think if the government invested in agriculture adequately, and even research in agriculture, in technologies that can improve productivity, then I think we can produce enough for everyone in Kenya and not have to rely on imports.
And Professor Zhang, of course, scaling up is also a big challenge for China. Chinese farmers also live in small patches of land on their own, and the aim is to have collective, large-scale farming to increase productivity. What is going to happen this year to improve farming?
Generally speaking, my observation is that in China, actually, agriculture sector and those products, to some extent, there is a negative, impact, but quite limited. For example, for those citizens, they need to buy, vegetable products, those, bread or, greens, rice in supermarkets in every place, including in Hubei province, in Wuhan city, and you can buy what you want to buy. Also, of course, maybe in some of small cities, lack of rice in short term, but very rapidly, because in China right now we have our storage of rice, wheat, corn, in order to provide supply for the market demand. Also, for those agricultural products in different regions today in China, even if logistics is facing with problems, transportation maybe have so a lot of constraints. However, today after has a very high efficiency to control coronavirus, also a pandemic. Also in China, actually, different places and different departments, they can work together to improve logistic efficiency, and then actually supply is not a problem in China.
And do you think that post-COVID farming will change in a dramatic way? Because of social distancing, logistic support, it makes more sense to have automated and large-scale farming than those traditional ways of farming. Professor Zhang?
Yeah. Today, actually, in China, we encourage, scale agriculture development Also, in China, if you look at land rights reform measures, today in China there are 3 different types of rights, including contract rights, operation rights. Also, you can have your also you can provide your rights, transfer your rights to other people to operate that land. So that means for some of big corporation or maybe collective operations organizations, they may collect more piece of land in China, and then they can improve productivity and provide high efficiency agriculture.
And Mr. Marrero, China has 1.4 billion people to feed. That's a huge demand. But also it has honed its agricultural skills and productivities to make that happen. So you are from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. What do you make of China's efforts to feed its people, and where do you think it is next kind of facing challenges from?
So China has done significant efforts, as it was explained before, in trying to improve productivity and also in trying to find ways and alternative mechanisms to increase the scale of production. And this is basically through contracting in land, types of contract arrangements that you can operate in a corporate way, large plots rather than having many small plots. But despite that, and the thing that is important is that given the significant demand of the country, also availability of trade and allowing goods to flow allows China also to be able to procure from international markets what is needed to satisfy the demand. And that's exactly the way it should be, because we are trying to optimize natural resources across the world. So it's not only a strategy within the country, but also it's a global strategy in trying to allow goods to flow that can assure food security in the world. And that's what we are exactly observing today. The moment that we start to put export restrictions, like was put in by some countries in rice, the prices will start to increase, and there will be volatility of prices. And rice is a very thin market, and therefore we need to avoid those type of policies to allow commodities to move, especially for native food importing countries.
So you don't think COVID-19 has posed a serious challenge to international food trade, which is the mainstay of food security, in comparison with the future challenges like climate change or population growth?
No, I think COVID-19, to be able to understand the impacts of COVID-19, we need to split the food in 2 groups. No? What we call staple commodities, like rice, maize, wheat, and soybeans, and corn, where they are capital intensive, the exporting countries are capital intensive, and where the labor lockdowns doesn't affect them. And also, of course, the major problem that was imposed in that was the logistical problem of transporting the commodities from their countries to the net importing countries. We observed some problems at the beginning of the lockdowns, some delays in terms of the vessels movement, but all those have been restricted. But that uncertainty of the transportation, of the logistics of transportation, created some countries to overreact, like the case of wheat in Russia and rice in other countries. But those are being calmed now. Vietnam stopped the quota of rice on the 1st of May. Russia quota is already fulfilled and deliveries are continuing. So today we see an improvement in terms of the flow of goods. Now in the high value commodity world, which is fruits, vegetables, fish, meat, the story is different because they are labor intensive and they are very sensitive to time because they are perishable. In those commodities we are observing more logistical problems, but they are starting to be resolved with some exceptions on some countries where, like for example in the meat production, the plants have been closed because of too many cases of COVID-19. Now, but despite all those logistical problems, we have food available today because we had a very good harvest and we have a lot of stocks. So as a result of that, the problem today is not a problem of food availability, it's a problem of food access. So how much money countries will have, given the recession that we are entering, to be able to acquire the food they need. So it's a different problem to 2007, 2008, where the problem was of food availability.
But that means access to food has become a very challenging problem because of COVID-19. Do you think now it makes sense for some people to consider planting those high-value crops near their home rather than them transported from a long way away?
Look, within high-value crops you have vegetables, which, yes, vegetables can be planted closer. China has done a great job on that. But there are other foods like fruits and meats and fish, which you cannot do that. They have to be, there are comparative advantages in terms of climate and realities, which at the end of the line, the best way is to keep the trade flowing. In the case of vegetables, those are the less traded in physical distance commodities. If you look at the map of the mobility of food, vegetables are moved very little distances. So it makes all the sense to start procuring and producing vegetables close by the urban and peri-urban sectors. But again, it is very different, and let me underscore that, very different from a world of self-sufficiency, which will be a mistake, especially under the situations that we have today of our natural resources. So we are of the idea that the flow of food is good, and there are some cases of food which growing it closely to households and to urban areas makes sense because it's more profitable, and because there are technologies today like horizontal farming that will allow you to be very productive being closer to urban areas.
And Dr. Konyanga, we have been reading reports about locusts, swarms of locusts affecting Africa, especially Eastern Africa. How great is this risk of famine or food shortages in East Africa and the Horn of Africa?
Mostly the areas that have been affected by locusts in the northern parts of Kenya, and also or what I would call arid and semi-arid regions of East Africa. So these areas are mostly, the agriculture is not so much, they are mostly pastoralists. So it's not had a lot of impact. The fear, especially for example in Kenya, has been that these locusts will migrate to islands areas or where we have high agricultural productivity. So if they move to these areas, then it will be a challenge to access adequate food, and therefore it will end up affecting agriculture and therefore food security. But for now, most of the areas that have been highly affected are actually in the semi-arid and arid areas of Kenya and other East African countries. So our fear is that if this moves now to the high productivity areas where we have agriculture as the main stay, then this will have an impact on food security. So we are hoping the technologies and the strategies that the government has put in place will actually be able to contain the spread of these locusts before the situation gets worse.
Thank you very much. Better technology, better agriculture, better distribution should be the key. Thank you all, Dr. Konyanga, Mr. Marrero, and Mr. Zhang. And you've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Joe in Beijing. Goodbye.